Hello Year 11, it's Miss Saul, Head of English at King Alfred's Academy, here today to talk you through the features of a letter that you will need to know for your writing to express a viewpoint question on your English language exam. As you are hopefully aware, there are also videos on features of an article and features of a speech. These three types of text are the main types of text your exam question may ask you to write. So you need to know the different features of these three types of text. So you know which ones to use. So this video, as I said, is going to talk you through the features of a letter. As I've said before, the kind of question that you're going to be given looks very much like this. You'll be given a statement. So in this case, the statement was post-16 education should not be compulsory. It is not appropriate to force young people to stay in education when it may not be the right path for them. So clearly this is a statement against the idea of educating young people at the age of 17 and 18 as a compulsory thing, making them do it. And then you'll be asked to write a particular type of text. In this case, write a letter, that should say to the Secretary for Education, in which you respond to this statement, okay? Again, it's about thinking about who you're writing for. So in this case, the Secretary for Education. So you're going to be writing formally. Top tip, you're always going to be writing formally, regardless of who you're writing to. But it's worth noting who you're writing to because you may be able to appeal to them in particular, or that group of people in particular. And then obviously just making sure that you're very clear on what it is the statement's saying. And then you decide whether you're going to agree with the statement or argue against it. Okay, so bugging the question, we would box what it's asking us to do, in this case to write a letter, and we'd underline the key bits of the statement and then the instructions so that we understand. And then the G in bug is just to keep glancing back at the question to make sure that we haven't veered off it in any way. Okay, so that's our question. Features of a letter. Please do make some notes on this. Please feel free to pause me at any point so that you can jot these down. Features of a letter, this is on our knowledge organizer as well, but I will go through it with you here. So we must start with the right salutation, the right greeting. So dear sir or madam, if you don't know their name, and in most cases you won't be given a name to write to, so therefore dear sir or madam is probably the most common way you're going to start this letter. However, if you do know the name of the person you're writing to, so for instance, if we were writing to our head teacher, Mr. Holroyd, then it would be Dear Mr. Holroyd. Okay, it needs to be written in paragraphs, and as I've said before, we'll be using the ethos, logos, pathos, conclusion structure. So as long as we plan with that, your sort of paragraph structure is already organised for you. We must end with the right sign off. And this is very much linked to the greeting, the salutation that you've used. So you need to end with yours faithfully if you do not know their name. So if you've started with dear sir or madam, you need to end with yours faithfully. So it's in good faith, you don't know them. Or if you know their name, so you started with something like Dear Mr. Holroyd, then yours sincerely, because you're being sincere, you do know who they are, okay? As I said, most of the time you're going to be starting with Dear Sir or Madam, and so therefore you're going to be ending with yours faithfully. Optionally as well, in the main part of the letter, you can refer to the act of reading to demonstrate you know you are writing a letter, just to sort of indicate to your reader, to your examiner, that you are still aware of the type of text you're writing. So as you read this letter, you might be wondering why it is that I feel so passionate about this, or whatever it is. Okay, so pause here to jot down a few notes about the main features of a letter, and then we'll go on to look at the waggle. Okay, so the waggle, I'm hoping you've managed to print this waggle because it's much easier to annotate with a copy in front of you. But if you don't, it's not the end of the world. I know we're all in trying times working from home at the moment. So I have put this up on the screen for you over the next 3 slides. So I'm going to ask you before we start annotating it, just to read it through completely once so you understand what the letter is saying, what it's about. Again, as I've said before with the article, this isn't a real letter. It's been written with the exam in mind to fulfill the criteria of the exam. But again, it is a real letter in so much as it meets all of the features of a letter. But obviously it's responding to the exam question. Okay, so I'm going to suggest that you pause, read through the first slide, click onto the next slide, pause there, read it, click onto the next slide and finish, and I'll meet you at the end. Okay, so as you can see, the letter that you've just read follows the ethos, logos, pathos conclusion structure. So it's got the 4 paragraphs, and very much it's important that we write in paragraphs, as one of my annotations will say in just a second. So key features of a letter then. Firstly, the right salutation. So we didn't know who we were writing to. We just knew that we were writing to the Secretary for Education. So we've started with dear sir or madam. Okay. Top tip, you'll pretty much never be wrong if you start like this. Okay. And then a good practice, it's not absolutely necessary, but good practice is an address on the right hand side, like it is on the screen here. Just at the start of the letter, before you write dear sir or madam, with the full date underneath. So each line of the address is on a new line, and then the full date is underneath the address, immediately underneath. Okay, so just as it looks on the screen. And then on the next line to the left, you start with dear sir or madam, or dear Mr. Holroyd, or whomever you're writing to. Okay, so they're the sort of key features there. And as I said, written in paragraphs, the ethos, logos, pathos, conclusion structure being used in each of your paragraphs. Okay, so pause here, make some notes if you've got your waggle in front of you. If you don't have your waggle in front of you, jot down the annotation and then write down the example from the letter here, so that you know what that looks like. Okay, so this is my logos paragraph. This is written like any logos paragraph. It's got my evidence, it's got my my statistics and facts. I've got a bit of a rhetorical question going on in there. In fact, there's a couple. So please, obviously feel free to annotate this with your main features of a logos paragraph, but there's nothing that's indicating that it's a particularly part of a letter. But the next paragraph does. So in my pathos, I've started with, at this point, you may assume as you read, so you're just referring to the act of reading there to show again that you're aware that you are writing a letter that is going to be read by a person, okay? So you might want to just pause here and make that annotation on the 3rd paragraph, or if you don't have the waggle in front of you, write down that annotation and then write down the example from the letter so you know what that looks like. You might want to write down the whole sentence. And then finally, this is my conclusion, and how I've ended my letter once I've written my conclusion is I'm ending with the right sign off. As it was started with dear sir or madam, it must end with yours faithfully. As you'll see, there's always a comma that goes over the, it goes after the yours faithfully. If I had started the letter by addressing it with a named person, then I should end my letter with yours sincerely instead. If you're really worried about whether you're going to get that right or not, my advice would be always to start with dear sir or madam and then always end with yours faithfully. Okay, and then you're not wrong. All right. And then finally, making sure that when you sign off with your name, that you formally sign off with a first and a last name, not just your first name. Okay, so when you're ending a formal letter, you should always use first and last name. Okay, right, so pause, make your last annotations. Please do make sure that you've also checked out the video on features of an article and features of a letter so that you're clear on the difference between the 3 types of texts. And then we will see you again soon. So take care, and hopefully we'll see you in school in the next few days. Thank you.